Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Legal Exchange. I'm Reena Sengupta, the Executive Director of the Digital Legal Exchange, and I'm here in conversation with Bill Deckelman, who's the Executive Vice President and General Counsel of DXC Technology. And Bill is one of the co-founders of the Digital Legal Exchange and one of the driving forces behind its progression and momentum. So, welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Reena. It's great to be with you.
So, we're going to talk a little bit about your journey at DXC Technology and where it began, and maybe for some of the viewers who don't know so much about DXC, perhaps you could just give us a little bit of context about what was happening in 2017 and what sort of started you on this massive program of digital transformation.
Sure. So, CSC, Computer Sciences Corporation, was an IT, is an IT services company, and we had a merger in 2017 with the Enterprise Services Division of HPE, which was also an IT services company. So, we were putting together two very large legacy IT services companies globally. And we knew with that transaction there would be a lot of synergies and a lot of cost takeout, but also the need to really aggressively expand globally with the business. And so we had quite a challenge on our hands. And we looked at a lot of traditional ways that we might address that and try to react to that and be ready for the merger. But we really struggled with how we were going to do this. So this is when we really turned to digital transformation, and we partnered with United Lex to look at completely redoing the way we were doing things and doing it through technology, enabling a lot of new processes and faster process through technology. And so that's what we determined we were going to do. And we did a lot of planning around that and then set off on the journey, really relying quite a bit on the investment that came in from United Lex for technology and also for the transformation expertise. And then the other part that I'm sure we'll talk about during this was the culture and all the work that we had to do around the culture. But that was the journey that we started on in 2017.
And so when you sort of went through, what were the kind of like key milestones? I mean, what did you sort of tackle first?
Well, the first year, we continued doing a lot of our planning, but I will say I think it took probably most of that first year to really just kind of stabilize, to bring the two organizations together. Remember, these are two organizations that did not know each other, so we had to put together the people globally and start working. And of course, the work never stopped. So that was a challenge to work on transformation while at the same time you're performing the day jobs of the team. So really, that first year was about stabilization. We transferred most of our contract negotiation team and our contract management team to United Lex. And so there was a transition. There was quite a change there for the people as well. And so that's why we focused on stabilizing the first year. But in the meantime, we did a lot of planning around where we were going to go once we had the organization ready to take off on the journey.
And can you just tell us, so how many people now sort of are part of the United Lex DXC team, and how many people are left in DXC?
So we have about 500 who are part of United Lex. And again, those are lawyers and other professionals who are negotiating transactions for us with our customers, and also our contract management group, which is the group of people who are managing contracts on accounts for our customers, global organization. And then we have about 100 other lawyers and professionals who are still with DXC, and they're, for the most part, performing in the areas of more general corporate employment, risk and areas like that, as opposed to as much transactional with our customers.
So your C-suite colleague back in the days, which he measured your success on, very much in terms of commercial outputs, revenues, top line, bottom line growth, share price. How did you measure the success of the project?
Well, we wanted to measure it a lot of different ways, both qualitatively and quantitatively. What you're referring to was, though, one of the first things that we did, looking to make an impact on the business itself, which is an important part of digital transformation. We focused on our contracting. And for anyone that knows much about IT services, contracting is always a challenge because the contracts are usually very complex and they take some time to negotiate. So what we did was really focus on what we call fast track, and that is to simplify our contracts, make them more modular and digital, and then train our people. And this is where culture comes in again, to be more flexible with those contracts and to really look to shorten the time it would take to negotiate these contracts and sign a customer and bring on that revenue. And that's what we had done, and we've continued to do it very successfully. It has really shrunk the time basically in half to be able to negotiate these contracts. So the C-suite executive you're referring to was very pleased, to see that. Since then, of course, we're measuring with a lot of metrics. The better and better that we get with data that we're able to collect, and then really start looking at how we can use it in different ways. We can put various metrics against that data. And a lot of those metrics are just good old-fashioned efficiency metrics that anyone would use. But now we've got actual data that allows us to really get some insight out of those metrics. And then we also have metrics where we're measuring for the business in terms of impact that we're able to make. And again, the fast track contracting certainly has continued to be a big part of that.
And if we think about that, was 2017, we're sort of 3 years on or so. Obviously, you've got this difference between, it's a much smaller team. You're working with United Elects in a different way. You're using technology differently. You mentioned something about culture. How has the culture changed of DXC Legal?
Yeah, the culture has really changed, and this does take time. I think most people understand that. But what has happened is, let me start at the beginning. That is, in 2017, we made a concerted effort to really focus on what is the culture that we're looking to move to, and where were we at that time with our organization's culture. So you really kind of need those benchmarks to know before you start on your journey about how you're going to change culture. And so what we were looking to do was go to an environment where we have people who are on the team who are passionate and energetic about transformation. They can take on change and deal with it. They're resilient in that way. They're curious. They're always wanting to learn, and they're always wanting to experiment. They're not afraid to fail. If something goes wrong, okay, that's fine. We did it quickly, so we can pick up and try again, something slightly different. So that was the kind of culture we were going for. And, not everyone has that set of traits, that you're looking for. The challenge, I think, for in-house legal and contracting professionals, for example, is, you've got to really be deep. You got to be competent in your area, your professional area of law and contracts or whatever it may be. But at the same time, you've got to have those, some people call them soft skills, but the people skills, the empathy to look at your client and understand the activities that you're doing. What impact are they really having on the client? And are they valuable to the client? So we need in our culture creative people, lawyers who can do that. And that's what we were trying to move to. And it does take time, but we're definitely getting there. And, we've talked a lot about how do you measure culture. It's difficult to do. There's a lot of research out there about this topic, but if nothing else, just qualitatively. Occasionally, here recently, when I'll have our leadership team on a video call with all of us, I'll just stop and pause and say, look at what we're doing today and the conversations we're having today versus what we would have been talking about 3 years ago. And that's where you really start to see the collaboration and the trust and all that's going into a culture that you're really looking for in digital transformation.
Do you find, or do you find that you hire different people? Are you hiring people with different skill sets? Are they still lawyers? What's the composition?
Yeah, look, we always are looking for, in terms of the lawyers, really good, not just barely competent, but really good, great lawyers. And as I mentioned, that's one of the challenges. You've got to kind of maintain that professional standard, and nothing has changed about that in all these decades. That's still very important. What's important for us, wrapped around that, again, is someone who has got the ability to kind of understand their context. They're self-aware of the value, the activities that they're doing every day, and they're wanting to make sure they're working on activities that are going to really deliver impact to the business, but at the same time satisfy our professional responsibilities. So, that's the kind of person. And I mentioned earlier too, just energy and passion, because a lot of the work that goes on with transformation happens at nights and on weekends. And in a global company, it of course kind of happens around the clock. So people that are doing this are really working extra hard, and it does require a lot of energy. And the way you get that is the passion for learning and changing for the better and being part of something that's really delivering real value to your client.
So, Bill, a question for you on a sort of personal, professional level. Given the fact that the culture's changed, the team's changed, and we'll get into sort of how it's changed even further, but how has it changed you as a legal leader within a major corporation? Like, what is Bill Deckelman in 2020 compared to Bill Deckelman in 2017?
Well, I think I've learned a lot. I'll say that for sure. And you get that through experience, of course. But I would say probably, it gives you a lot more confidence in the vision of what you're trying to do. So as you're part of the broader leadership team of your company, you just have more of that confidence that as your peers are seeing what we're doing in legal with transformation, it carries some respect, with it, and they do respect that. And so that is, something that's been very, very helpful. And the other thing I would say is just a lot of pride, in the team, and being able to, see how the team has come together and are performing. That's really been very gratifying to see.
And what about your business colleagues? How do they see legal now compared to a few years ago?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, with a lot of respect, and I should say probably a lot of surprise usually when they hear some of the things that we're doing with data. But it really brings legal into the kind of modern conversation of what's happening among the leadership team, because in today's world, at least on the business side, digital transformation is definitely happening, and it's on every CEO's mind. It's a huge focus. And so when they see that legal and contracts and these other functions are doing the same thing and understand it and can contribute to what the company is doing as a whole, it just changes the entire conversation.
So, Bill, can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing today? Because obviously you've moved on quite significantly from just sort of automating your contracting processes. You're doing a huge amount with data, dashboards, and being much more interoperable. Can you talk us through some of that?
Yes, and this is where it starts to really get interesting. It's taken us 3.5 years to get here, but it's really getting interesting, and that's because we've been starting some time ago putting data together, and like most companies, our data was completely unstructured, so we started capturing more and more as we got deeper into our transformation. And once you start building a history with your data, then of course you can start looking at trends and you can start actually making sense of what the data is telling you. So this is what, frankly, out of digital transformation, one of the biggest benefits is becoming really a data-driven organization, and that's what we've done. And so I'd say probably, not only does having that data, and as you mentioned, dashboards enable you to manage a global organization much more effectively, but it really, again, it starts to point to the value proposition of what an in-house legal function is doing for the client, for the business. And so that's really what we're doing in terms of, for example, in the risk area. Now we're able to start looking at our overall portfolio of thousands of contracts with our customers and start looking at various things that we're curious about and various things that we're seeing in the trends. And so, you finally get to a point where that saying about being able to run the business instead of the business running you, you feel like you have a little more control over your destiny. You can start to see what's coming and start managing and preparing for that sort of thing. So this is the most significant thing to me that's coming out of this is that capability, which without the technology and the process and the people who are willing to enter a lot of that data globally, you can't get there. You just won't. You'll be blind to what I'm talking about. So this is just huge, and it's making such a difference. And that is where you start to see real impact on the business when the legal function and the contract function can actually start giving information that says, here's what's coming and here's what we should do to adjust. Not to mention, as we talked about earlier, that it's almost become table stakes that, okay, yeah, you can do it faster and better. What's next? Well, what's next is the analytics and the intuition and the insights that are coming out of the data that you're gathering.
Can you give me an example of a piece of sort of transformative management information that you've managed to get, that you've been able to feed back to the business, or some sort of or on the analytics side, what you're looking at?
Yeah, it's really in the contracts portfolio. And I should mention as well that in terms of getting closer to the business, which is, certainly an objective every legal organization should have, we've got an open portal with them now. So they have a lot more visibility into what we're doing. So a lot of this data they can see as the data is coming in and how it's getting reported out in the dashboard. So not only do we get into conversations with them about their view on what they're seeing, but we're able to take, as I mentioned in the risk area, an overall portfolio look at our contracts. And we can look at, for example, uh, terms and conditions in this market are very competitive. And so when we're bidding on a large opportunity, the competitors who are bidding as well we're all being judged on how do we contract with that customer. So it's very important to be able to look pretty deep into the data to say, well, what do we typically do? What have we done on similar contracts in the past with these types of terms and conditions? What have we done with this particular type of a customer? What have we done with these competitors? What have they done? All those analytics start coming together, and it's probably pretty obvious how that really helps the business as it's preparing its bid, to go into an opportunity. So that's what's exciting, and that's what we're starting to see, and that of course gets the salespeople, the sales organization, but the business in general very very interested.
Sure, yeah, no, that I can see that's transformative, and also changes the way, presumably, the business sort of interacts with the lawyers, and equally how the lawyers interact with the business, and then you come to that whole kind of ever evolving cultural piece. I mean, and what are you doing on this front now in terms of making sure that you keep up with all of these changes?
Well, on the culture side, we've been working on this since the beginning, and I think anyone who's attempted to do this with a large organization appreciates the challenges with doing that. What's interesting is you do need to have a lot of conversation and a lot of leadership from the top talking about, this is where we want to go, because it's important for the team to understand, what is it the leadership believes in, and what kind of culture are we trying to create here. That's really important. But you can't do it just with that by any means. You really need the efforts of the entire organization. So, how do you go about doing that? Well, there are activities that you want to kind of initiate, in your organization to get the team working together and starting to think about, where do we together and then through collaboration want to go with this. So, one thing we're doing that's really interesting here just recently, over the summer, I was doing some reading and we were talking about all this, and we were, over 3 years into our transformation journey, and it just felt like we needed a shot in the arm. We needed another boost of energy to kind of push us forward for the next 3 years. So one thing we've run across is Dr. John Cotter from Harvard, who many people probably recognize, has written a tremendous number of books on leadership and change and transformation. And so we found his book, Accelerate, that talks about a transformation journey and how you accelerate really a changing culture for a journey like that. So, and one of the really interesting things that came out, which was new to me to really articulate it this way, is the importance in a large organization of having, still important to have that hierarchy of management, but surrounding that is more of a network approach, meaning you're involving all your teammates in a network that they have their own agenda where they need to be thinking about, what kind of culture do we want, where are we headed in terms of how we're delivering to our client, and things like that. So it brings together, it doesn't say either one is good or bad. It says bring them together, and they both have to work together. So we had Dr. Cotter come on and speak with us, and we're kicking off some cohorts who are working together to kind of follow his methodology of going out and looking for what's the next opportunity. And there are a lot of opportunities, things that we can do through digital transformation that are just really interesting. And here again, it's energized a number of our people who are curious and who want to get involved and be part of that. So that's the kind of thing you do to actually live the culture, and because that's what you've got to get to, is a point where you're living it through your daily activities. So that's just one example, but it's a fun one that we've just recently kicked off.
So, Bill, I mean, you've been through this journey. I mean, what advice would you have for other general counsel going through a digital transformation journey? What should they be thinking about first? I mean, what would you wish that you had done differently? I suppose actually.
We're very fortunate that coming through the journey somehow we made it. We made it through very, I'd say, productively, and it went pretty well. So there aren't any major things that I would change. But what I would say is I would probably start on the culture, the people aspects of this more aggressively earlier, because it just takes a lot of time, and I realized that at the beginning, but probably not to the extent that I should have. And so I would say that's really important, which leads into your question of, what should a general counsel be thinking of at the beginning? Well, first of all, you've got to, you're going to want to make sure you've got your vision for the organization very clear about where you want to take the organization. Where does it want to go? And then at that point, I'd say, as lawyers, a lot of times we're very anxious to jump in and start solving the problem. But in fact, what you need to do is kind of slow down and step back and listen and talk with your people, your teams, with your business clients, and talk about, what is it that will make the most impact for all of them going forward. But you can't do it all. You're not going to have the time or the money to do everything you want to do. So you've got to get really clear about the vision. Where do you want to go? And then what are the important things along the way that you need to accomplish as part of the transformation for the people and for the business? And so, in essence, you're preparing to kind of build a roadmap, for the steps along the way. And there are definite things that you need to do in a sequence going forward. So that's the way I would approach it, is step back and kind of do some listening, to what people are saying. The other thing is reading, and just, there's so much going on in the world of digital transformation right now. And one thing I should make very clear is that for lawyers, where do you go to get that information? You go to the business side. There's more and more happening, more occurring in the legal writing that you can read as well, but so much of it is on the business side. And so that's where you need to go. And I hope we'll have a chance to talk about the digital legal exchange. That was really kind of the impetus behind that. But that's really important as well, is to read broadly and understand what's happening in the real world, because it can have a real impact on what you do.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting as we're both working on the digital legal exchange, and we're hearing so many more stories from general counsel who are wrestling with where do they start. I mean, one of the things that we talk about a lot about is this idea of client centricity, and of course, a lot of general counsel say, well, they're incredibly aligned with the business, or they're embedded with the business, they understand the internal client, but invariably, often when they're doing surveys or internal surveys, or when through the digital legal exchange, we've been doing some internal surveys, there is this kind of disconnect between what the internal client wants from their legal department and what they value from their legal department, and what the in-house lawyers think that should be valued. And I wonder, in your journey, Bill, how, what role client centricity played in everything that you were doing. How did you manage to get, how did you manage to really understand your client and respond to what they wanted, or get ahead of what they wanted, actually, is what we're talking about.
Yeah, and this is really critical. This is, really kind of the most important thing about coming out of digital transformation is that I always tell my team it's not about the lawyers. For once, it's not about you, it's about the business. And again, lawyers just kind of have a tendency to want to do all the talking instead of listening. And so it really comes down to, I think what happens is so often we all get so busy, with our day jobs, that we don't take the time just to interact and engage enough with the business. And I'm not talking about just transactional. I'm talking about, actually talking with them about their challenges and, how could we work together? Because many of these problems are hybrid problems. They're somewhat legal, but they're also somewhat business, and it takes across the enterprise team to really deal with these issues. So that's what has to happen is real engagement with the business where you really understand what really matters to them. That's what it comes down to, as opposed to thinking that you have an idea, but you've got to go test those ideas in real conversations with the business. That is so important to do.
Sure, and it's interesting actually, I suppose, for a legal function, when we're talking about digital transformation, often we're talking about business model transformation, complete strategic shifts, when we're talking about it in the business context, new sources of revenues. And when we try and imagine that for a legal function that is becoming digital, obviously they're a function, they're a department within a company, but when you think about a function that really does go through digital transformation, I mean, you almost get back to the point of, what is the purpose of the legal function? And how is that going to evolve as they completely change the way they work? And if you get, more kind of management information, more kind of data, then actually your role and the advice that you give can completely change. Your value completely changes. I suppose I was thinking about, a team at AB InBev when the head of compliance has got the whole compliance and legal functions sort of gone through a big digital transformation journey themselves. And one of the things that was quite significant to me was that the head of compliance also then became the head of compliance and ethics. And it was a sort of acknowledgement that the compliance and legal function could influence behaviour. And I thought that was very interesting because that's a very different kind of notion of a legal function to yesteryear of the passive function that sort of responds. Have you got any thoughts about what does going forward? What does a digitally transformed legal function look like going forward, and what is its purpose? How does its purpose change?
Yeah. Well, actually, I think it's allowing that in-house legal function to finally do what we should have been doing and have been trying to do for all these decades. In other words, to really provide again always good, solid legal advice and performing the role of looking out for risk and managing risk. No doubt about it. That's really important for the in-house lawyers to do. But for an in-house function, what's really important as well is to help drive the business. And all these ways that we've been talking about with data is what's going to allow that to happen. And so, great examples that you're giving, but it's about the lawyers becoming more like their peers in the sense that they have a broader vision of the whole entire business, and they understand what's important to the business. So that's what it all comes down to is just being, we mentioned client centric, but being very focused on what the value proposition is and what do you do to really impact that and be objective about that, and as opposed to what you think the business may want, go find out, and then deliver that. Rena, let me turn the questions back around on you just for a moment. We've mentioned the Digital Legal Exchange and something I know we're both very excited about, but can you talk about that for a minute and some of the things you're seeing there? And what is it about the exchange that got you interested in being involved?
Sure. I suppose one of the things I'd been toying about with last autumn with our FT Innovative Lawyers program, I thought about calling it the Digital Lawyers program. We've been running Innovative Lawyers for 15 years, and I could see that from everything that we looked at, that actually the legal profession becoming digital was a business imperative. I didn't think you could necessarily call that innovation if it's something that they have to do and to be relevant to business. And so when our chairman, Mark Cohen, approached me with the idea of digital legal exchange, I thought, my goodness, this is it. This gets to the heart and the core of what needs to happen to the profession. And of course, with the digital legal exchange wanting to work with corporate legal teams first, I thought that was the right place to start, because obviously over the years we've seen bigger transformation in corporate law departments than we have done in law firms. And of course, they are the engine of growth and change, and as major purchasers, they can really impact the entire industry. But equally, what we saw is when you had a function like yours, Bill, at DXC, which goes through, even when you started in your digital transformation journey, you had such a huge business impact. We thought, well, actually, that must be the future. This has to be where law departments have to go. And so it was an easy kind of step to say, right, and obviously it was a non-profit, so it was something that we're doing for the industry, and it's something that's where we felt that we could really make a difference. So the Digital Legal Exchange has got an incredible faculty of over 16 just academics, practitioners, technologists, and the other thing that's really important plank of this is that I think having the business involved is very, very important, because whenever we've seen really big transformations, as in your case, Bill, the business has been sort of pushing as well, and they have been very, very involved in it. And what I loved about the Digital Legal Exchange is that all of our workshops, for example, involve the legal function as well as the C-suite colleagues, uh, and you have to have that alignment, a great alignment. So any kind of vehicle that push that alignment together, that notion of client centricity that we spoke about, was one that was very appealing to me. I suppose I've been in this industry for 30 years, and I've always heard from both in-house lawyers and private practice lawyers that the thing that makes me different is that I deliver seamless client service. I'm really concerned about my clients. I really care about my clients. But one of the biggest findings that we have from all of our research that we do is around this disconnect between what clients and lawyers perceive as value. And I felt the Digital Legal Exchange would be an incredible bridge to sort of bring those notions together from where it starts, in corporate law departments, and then of course spread that to the rest of the industry. So it's one of those very exciting projects, Bill, and I'm really glad to be working on it with you.
Well, it's so well said too, and it's that opportunity for the deep engagement with the business that I think, as you mentioned, is so exciting about the exchange.
No, great, thank you. And I think that may be us out of time, but thank you very much for your time, Bill.
Thank you, Rena.
Enjoy the rest of your day.